What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 6 top 12 defense rankings. I put out my first set of defense rankings last week. Seemed like you guys liked them, so we're running it back here for Week 6. Once again, trying to get this video out before you guys have to make your waiver wire claims if you want to pick up, one of these defenses heading into Week 6. Let's just dive right into it here. We're going to start off in Tier 1. And I think I have five, tier one defenses here. I think there are a lot of interesting options that could potentially be the number one defense this week. So the first one here, my number one defense, it is going to be the Steelers going up against the Raiders. The Raiders this week have the third fewest implied points. Defenses going up against the Raiders have scored the fourth most fantasy points per game. And then you look at the Steelers defense. They have the good matchup, but it's also, a fairly solid fantasy defense. They are averaging the seventh most points per game. Now, they haven't been completely locked down. I don't think they're a terrifying matchup. But you look at this Raiders offense, they have not been productive. You have a quarterback controversy. We don't know if it's going to be Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. I don't think either one of those dudes is like some sort of amazing answer. And then it also seems like Devontae Adams is not going to be playing this week. So, not scared at all of this Raiders offense. Steelers defense is solid. I think they are a really strong play this week. Now, my number two defense is going to be the Chargers going up against the Broncos. We have the Chargers here coming off the bye week. The Broncos have the second fewest implied points. And then you look at this Chargers defense, they're averaging the sixth most fantasy points per game. I know the Broncos are coming off a pretty solid performance in week 5, kind of had a breakout offensive game, but that was against the Raiders. I still think, this is not the best offense out there. I think Bo Nix still going to have some growing pains. They haven't had a super effective run game. So I still like the Chargers here, even though the Broncos are coming off of a decent week 5. Then I have the Texans going up against the Patriots. This is less about the Texans being like a super amazing fantasy defense and more about the Patriots just being pretty much incompetent offensively here. They have the fewest implied points this week. Defenses going up against the Patriots are averaging the fifth most points per game. And then I guess they also have a quarterback controversy. Seems like this could be the week that Drake May steps in, replaces Jacoby Brissett. I would say I'd be a little bit more concerned with Drake May playing quarterback just because I think he has the higher ceiling as a quarterback. But it's also like his first NFL start. Obviously not behind the best offensive line. His weapons are bad. This could also be a spot where he has a really rough kind of rookie debut and the Texans are able to take advantage of it. So love the Texans here as a defense play. Then I have the Broncos. Talked about the other side of this matchup with the Chargers, but the Broncos here going up against the Chargers. The Chargers have the fifth fewest implied points. They have scored 10 points in back-to-back games. So that offense has not looked great. You had like a banged up Justin Herbert heading into the bye. They were super effective on the ground. At least J.K. Dobbins was in week 1, week 2. We didn't see that same efficiency week 3 and week 4. And then you look at this Broncos defense. They have been a very solid unit. They are third in fantasy points per game. The last 3 weeks, they have allowed 7, 9, and 18 points. So it's a solid defense with a pretty solid matchup. I think they definitely belong here in tier 1. And then my final tier 1 defense is going to be the Eagles. They're coming off the bye week, and they haven't been a super top tier defense to start off the year. I don't think they're going to be a top tier defense rest of season, but I think they're competent enough to take advantage of this matchup here against the Browns. Defenses going up against the Browns have scored the second most fantasy points per game. The Browns have not scored over 20 points this season. They might not even have hit 20 points this season. Deshaun Watson has not hit 200 passing yards in a single game. It seems like they're going to stick with him. They have no upside with Watson at quarterback. They have a very, very low floor with him at quarterback. Obviously, the turnovers are going to be there. The yardage is probably not going to be there from this offense. The touchdowns, the points, probably not going to be there from this offense. So even though the Eagles haven't been the best defensive option, I think this is just too good of a matchup to pass on here. And they definitely could be on waivers. Hadn't been super productive early on, coming off the week 5 bye. Definitely a team that you could add on here if you're trying to stream the defense position. Now shifting into tier 2, two defenses in this tier. We're going to start off with the Bills going up against the Jets. This Jets offense still isn't clicking. They are tied for the fifth fewest implied points this week. This Bills defense has been all right, 11th in points per game here. I know the Jets, they have some offensive firepower with Rodgers at quarterback, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, but all three of those guys have kind of been struggling to start off the season. Their run game has not been effective. Breece Hall hasn't had the big playability. Garrett Wilson, like he's coming off a decent game looking at the counting stats, but 22 targets turned it into like 13 for 100, not overly efficient. Aaron Rodgers coming off a 3 turnover game. I think the Bills are a fine option here. I think this is the Monday night game. So I think they're a nice like mid-tier number one defense. And then also in this tier, we have the Bears going up against the Jaguars. The Bears are averaging the fourth most fantasy points per game. You look at this Jaguars team, they started off 0-4. The offense was really struggling through 4 weeks. They had scored 20 or fewer points in all 4 of those games. They ended up breaking out, having a huge week 5 against the Colts, putting up 34. I do think they're a better offense than like barely hitting 20 points through 4 weeks. But I also think, they have some turnovers in them. I don't think they're a top tier offensive unit. And this Bears defense has been very solid through 5 weeks. So I think the Bears are definitely playable in this spot. Now, shifting into tier 3, we're actually just going to have 2 teams going up against each other. So we have the Colts and the Titans. I think both offenses are questionable. Both defenses, not the greatest, but the matchups are solid. So starting off here with the Titans, this is going to be assuming we get Anthony Richardson back. If it's Flacco again at quarterback, I really wouldn't want to mess with this Colts offense. We just saw him, put on a monster performance against the Jaguars. So this is assuming Richardson is back. I think there's definitely more turnover upside for this defense if it is Richardson at the quarterback position. The Colts have the 12th fewest implied points. In my opinion, just not a super scary matchup. And like I said, I do think Richardson is prone to turn the ball over in this matchup. And then up next, it's the Colts taking on the Titans. Should have flipped it. My Colts are number 8, Titans number 9. But for the Colts here, the Titans have the 8th fewest implied points. They've actually allowed the most points per game to opposing defenses. So they've been just a great team to attack, a great offense to attack. We don't know if it's going to be Will Levis, Mason Rudolph. I feel like Will Levis probably has like the higher ceiling, but also has a much more disastrous floor just with his turnover potential. Mason Rudolph, like maybe he's not going to have a 3 turnover game, but I also don't think he's going to be going out there slinging it, making a ton of amazing plays. So like maybe the offense is a little bit more boomer bust with Levis, and then they're more probably just like below average with Mason Rudolph. That would be my take on this situation. But I think either defense from this matchup could be an interesting play. And then the final tier here, tier 4, the first defense here is going to be the Falcons going up against the Panthers. Now the Falcons not coming off the best game against the Buccaneers. And then this Panthers matchup, like after 2 weeks, it was like, all right, this is going to be a smash spot. You want the defense playing the Panthers. It definitely has not been like that with Andy Dalton at quarterback, but they did kind of come back down to earth in week 5, put up 10 points against the Bears. I still think they have some boom weeks in them. Chuba Hubbard's been super impressive. Deontay Johnson has had some big games, but this is still not a great overall offense. I think this is a fine play here for the Falcons. And then for the 49ers, we have them going up against the Seahawks here. 49ers defense has been solid for fantasy, 5th in points per game. The Seahawks have been putting up points. They scored 20 plus in the first 4 weeks, but coming off a pretty down game against a not great Giants defense. So I still think this is a fine spot to play the 49ers. Like I said, not the greatest matchup, but this is more buying into the actual defense. And then the final team here, the Packers going up against the Cardinals. This Green Bay defense has been really strong for fantasy. 2nd in points per game. They are 2nd in interceptions. They are 6th in sacks. So they're making some big plays. This Cardinals offense is kind of tough to gauge because they had a few like really bad performances. Like maybe this is a team you might want to target. But then they've also come out. They've had some big offensive showings, looked decent against a very good 49ers defense. So I think they're kind of a weird spot. You don't really know what you're going to get out of that unit, but I still think the Packers defense is good enough to potentially play against the Cardinals here. And then some honorable mentions, teams that definitely could have slid into tier 4. We have the Raiders going up against the Steelers. Now, obviously, this is like the Steelers offense we're looking at, not really the Raiders defense. They just kind of got shredded by the Broncos. But the Steelers are just so passive offensively that I think they only have much upside if they're like trailing in a game. So I think it was against the Colts a couple weeks ago where that's when they kind of turned it on. They let Fields really unleash it because they were trailing in that game. They needed the points. When they're winning, they want to get into like these grimy games. They're fine taking field goals, not going for it on 4th and short. They'll punt, instead of going for 4th and shorts. So if the Raiders aren't scoring in this game, I could also see the Steelers kind of matching it and just like grinding out like a 3-point win. But I definitely would understand the hesitancy to, play this Raiders defense. You also have the Jets going up against the Bills. Bills offense been a little bit up and down, not as great over the past couple of weeks. They started off super strong. This Jets defense has been solid. They just fired Robert Saleh. Don't know if that's going to make a huge difference. Obviously, he was a defensive-minded head coach, but believe they promoted the DC to the interim coach. So it's a good defense, but not a great matchup. Could be playable, sure. They look pretty solid against the Vikings. And then the final team, it would be the Bucks. They don't have a great defense, but if the Saints do not have Derek Carr, I think that could be a matchup you want to attack if he is missing this game. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 12 defenses, plus a couple of honorable mentions. If you guys have any fantasy questions, drop them down below. If you enjoyed, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.